The sound of the train whistle echoed through the station, long and lonely like the cry of a bird that had lost its way. Clara Whitmore held her two small babies close to her chest as the cold morning air touched her face. The twins were wrapped in thin blankets, their cheeks red from the chill. She whispered softly to them, promising that everything would be all right. "We're almost there, my loves," she said, even though her own heart was full of fear. It had been 3 long days on the train, with little food and even less rest. The seats were hard and the babies cried often, drawing curious looks from strangers. But Clara kept her head high. She was used to looks. Ever since her husband Samuel had died in a mining accident 2 years ago, people had looked at her with pity, and sometimes judgment. She had done her best to survive, working as a seamstress, taking in washing and skipping her own meals so her children could eat. But deep down, Clara knew she could not keep living that way. Winter was coming, and the small town she lived in had few opportunities for a woman with no family and 2 children. When she saw the advertisement in the newspaper, "Honest, God-fearing man seeks wife to share in a simple life on a wheat farm," she read it over and over again. It had been placed by a man named Harold Finch from a town called Millstone. At first she laughed softly to herself at the idea. A mail-order bride, it sounded desperate. But the more she thought about it, the more it seemed like a chance. A new beginning. Maybe a man like Harold, who worked the land and lived far from city gossip, would not care about her past. Maybe he would be kind to her boys, so she wrote him a letter, short, simple, and honest. She told him her name, her age, and that she was a widow. She didn't hide that she had children. "They are my heart," she wrote, "and I could not leave them behind." She prayed that would not scare him away. To her surprise, he wrote back. His letter was neat and polite, written in a strong hand. He said he admired her honesty. He told her he wanted a partner, someone who could cook, help around the farm, and share his faith. There was nothing romantic in his words, but there was something solid about them. His tone sounded steady, responsible, the kind of man who did not make promises he couldn't keep. That gave Clara hope. They exchanged a few letters over the next month. He sent her a photograph of himself, tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp eyes and a trimmed beard. In the photo, he looked serious, almost proud. She sent him one in return, holding the twins. She had worn her best dress and tried to smile. Then one day a letter came that changed everything. It was short, only a few lines. Harold wrote that he had decided she was the kind of woman he wanted as a wife. "If you can make the journey," he said, "I will have Reverend Marks prepare the ceremony." He included train fare and directions to the town. Clara stared at that letter for a long time. Her hands trembled as she read it again and again. This was it, her chance. She packed their few belongings in a small trunk: 2 dresses, a worn Bible, her sewing kit, and the twins' baby blankets. Before she left, she visited her husband's grave. She stood there quietly, the cold wind brushing her hair. "I'm sorry, Samuel," she whispered, "but I have to do this. I have to give them a life." The journey was hard. The train was crowded and loud, and food was expensive. She had packed some bread and apples, but by the second day they were gone. The babies cried from hunger, and she rocked them for hours, humming lullabies to calm them. A kind old woman shared some milk and biscuits with her on the second night, saying softly, "You're brave, dear. Not many women would take such a step." Clara smiled through her exhaustion. "I'm not brave," she said. "Just a mother." When the train finally slowed near Millstone, Clara pressed her face to the window. The land outside stretched wide and golden, open fields, distant hills, and a few scattered houses. It was beautiful but lonely. She felt her heart race as the train came to a stop. This was her new home. She stepped down onto the platform, her babies in her arms and her small trunk at her feet. The air smelled of wheat and dust. People glanced at her curiously. A young woman with 2 infants, clearly not from around here. She looked around for Harold, her heart beating fast. Then she saw him, the man from the photograph, standing near the station sign. He wore a dark coat and hat, his arms crossed. For a moment she almost smiled, but as she walked closer, something in his eyes changed. He looked from her to the babies, and his expression hardened. "You brought both of them?" he asked flatly. Clara's smile faded. "Yes," she said softly. "I told you I had twins. I thought—" he began, then stopped. His jaw tightened. The letters didn't make it sound like this, she blinked, confused. I was honest, Mr. Finch. I told you they were my children. They have no one else. He shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as if embarrassed by her presence. This isn't what I expected, he muttered. I thought you were a woman who could help on the farm. But you've got two little mouths to feed. I can't take on that burden. Clara felt the words hit her like stones. Burden? She repeated softly. He avoided her eyes. I'm sorry, he said shortly. It wouldn't work. You should go back. She stared at him in disbelief. Go back? I sold everything I had to come here. He picked up his hat, his tone cold. That was your choice. I didn't ask for children. For a long moment, Clara stood frozen on the wooden platform. The train had already pulled away. The baby stirred in her arms, sensing her trembling. She could feel every eye in the station watching. Her cheeks burned with humiliation, but she lifted her chin. I understand, she said quietly. Good day, Mr. Finch. She turned and walked away, though her knees felt weak. There was nowhere to go, no place to stay. A kind-looking woman selling pies outside the station called out gently, Ma'am, do you need help? Clara forced a smile and shook her head. Thank you, she said, her voice trembling. But we'll be all right. She found the small church at the edge of town by following the sound of the bell. The door was open and the warmth of candlelight spilled out. Inside, Reverend Marks was sweeping the aisle. When he saw her, he stopped and set down the broom. My goodness, he said, taking in her pale face and the baby's. You look half frozen, child. Come in, please. Clara hesitated. I'm sorry to trouble you, Reverend. I was supposed to be married today, but... Her voice broke. He nodded gently. Say no more. Come inside. The Lord does not turn away the weary. He led her to a small back room where there was a cot and a stove. He found some milk for the babies and a piece of bread for her. The warmth made her eyes fill with tears. She whispered a shaky thank you as she sat on the cot, holding her children close. That night, as the twins slept beside her, Clara lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her dreams of a new beginning had vanished in a single cruel moment. But beneath the sorrow, a small spark of strength began to burn. She had come this far. She would not give up now. In the distance, the church bell tolled softly in the night. Somewhere out in that wide town, she knew the man who had rejected her slept soundly, untouched by guilt. But she also knew, though she did not yet see it, that another man would soon notice her courage and kindness, and that her story was only just beginning. Morning light poured gently through the narrow church windows as Clara awoke. The soft cries of her baby stirred her from sleep, and for a moment she forgot where she was. The wooden walls, the faint scent of candle wax, the quiet hum of the town waking outside, it all felt strange and unfamiliar. Then she remembered the station, the rejection, and the kind voice of Reverend Marks who had offered her shelter. The twins were hungry again. She held them close, humming softly while feeding them the last of the milk the Reverend had given her. They were small, fragile, and yet their warmth gave her strength. As she watched their tiny hands grasp her dress, she whispered, We'll be fine, I promise. When she stepped out of the church later that morning, the town was already alive. Men were heading toward the fields and women were sweeping porches or hanging laundry. People turned their heads when they saw her. Some whispered quietly. Others simply stared. Her dress was wrinkled, her hair loose from travel, and the twins clung to her shoulders. She could feel the weight of their eyes and the curiosity behind their looks. Clara tried to stay calm. She walked toward the general store to ask if there was any work she could do. The shopkeeper, a heavy-set woman named Mrs. Brandt, gave her a polite but cautious smile. You're the lady who came for Harold Finch, aren't you? She asked. Clara nodded, her voice soft. Yes, ma'am. But things didn't go as planned. Mrs. Brandt frowned slightly. I heard. Folks talk fast in a small town. Then, after a pause, she added kindly, You poor thing. That man's got more pride than sense. Clara's lips trembled, but she managed a small smile. Thank you for saying so, Mrs. Brandt sighed. I don't have much work, dear. But the church always needs cleaning, and Dr. Turner sometimes looks for help with washing linens. He's a good man. You might ask him. Clara thanked her and left, feeling a small spark of hope. That afternoon, she walked to the town clinic. It was a simple wooden building with a white sign that read, Millstone Medical Office. A horse was tied out front, and the faint smell of herbs came from the open door. She hesitated for a moment, then knocked gently. A tall man in his early 30s looked up from a desk inside. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a calm, thoughtful face. His sleeves were rolled up and his hands were stained from ink and medicine. "Good afternoon," he said, standing. "How can I help you?" Clara stepped inside shyly. "My name is Clara Whitmore," she said. "Reverend Mark said you might need some help here. I can clean, wash, or sew if needed." Dr. Turner studied her for a moment. He had heard whispers that morning about a young woman who had come to marry Harold Finch and been turned away. He saw the exhaustion in her face, the way her arms tightened protectively around the two small children. "You came from the east?" he asked gently. "Yes," she said. "By train. We have nowhere else to go, but I'll work for anything you can spare." He nodded slowly. "I could use some help. The linens pile up faster than I can keep them clean. You'd be paid fairly." Tears filled her eyes at the kindness in his tone. "Thank you, doctor. You don't know what this means." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I do. Everyone needs a beginning somewhere." That night, Clara worked until her hands ached. She scrubbed floors, folded sheets, and polished the brass handles until they gleamed. Dr. Turner stayed late as well, treating a farmer with a broken wrist and an old woman with a fever. He moved with quiet patience, never raising his voice. When the twins began to fuss, he stopped for a moment and smiled at them. "You've got strong lungs, little ones," he said kindly. Clara blushed, murmuring an apology. "They're usually quieter," he shook his head. "Children should make noise. It means they're alive and well." For the first time in days, she laughed softly. The sound surprised even her. Over the next few weeks, Clara began to settle into life in Millstone. Reverend Marks allowed her to stay in the small room behind the church, and Dr. Turner made sure she always had work at the clinic. She washed the sheets, kept the waiting area clean, and sometimes helped comfort the sick when the doctor was busy. The people of the town, at first wary of her, began to soften. When Mrs. Brandt's son caught a bad cough, it was Clara who brought warm soup and stayed through the night until he recovered. When a farmer's wife fell ill, Clara sat by her bedside reading softly from the Bible until she slept. Slowly, people began to see that she was not just the rejected bride, but a kind, hard-working woman who asked for nothing but a chance. Still, not everyone was kind. Some women whispered that she had tricked Harold by hiding the truth about her children. Others said she was too proud, refusing charity. Clara tried not to listen. Each morning, she walked through the town with her head high, the twins in a small cart she had borrowed, and a quiet grace that made even the gossipers fall silent as she passed. Dr. Turner noticed all of it. He watched how she carried herself, how she comforted others before thinking of herself. One evening, as he packed his instruments after a long day, he looked up to see Clara standing by the window, folding sheets. The setting sun cast a warm glow on her face. "You've worked too long today," he said gently. She smiled faintly. "Work keeps me steady, doctor. It keeps me from thinking too much." He nodded. "Thinking can be heavy when your heart's been hurt." Her hands froze for a moment. Then she whispered, "Yes. But hearts heal, don't they?" He looked at her, his voice soft. "They do, especially kind ones." The words touched her deeply, and though she didn't reply, she felt something warm bloom inside her chest, a small comfort she hadn't felt since before Samuel's death. Winter came quickly that year. Snow covered the streets, and the wind howled through the cracks in the church walls. Clara made thick blankets from old cloth and kept the twins bundled tight. The townsfolk began to depend on her more, for mending clothes, cooking simple meals for the sick, and helping at the clinic. One night, just after a blizzard swept through the town, Dr. Turner knocked on the church door. Clara opened it, surprised to see him standing there covered in snow, holding a small box. "I brought some medicine," he said, stepping inside. "Reverend Marks told me one of the boys had a cough." Clara nodded, her eyes full of worry. "Yes, Matthew's been wheezing all evening. I was afraid it might get worse." The doctor knelt beside the cradle, listening to the child's breathing. "It's mild," he said gently. "He'll be fine with rest and warmth." "You're doing everything right." Relief flooded her face. "Thank you, doctor," she whispered. He smiled, shaking his head. "No need to thank me. That's what I'm here for." He looked around the small room. Simple but clean, with neatly folded clothes and a small wooden cross above the bed. "You've made this place a home," he said softly. Clara's eyes glistened. "It's not much, but it's ours." As he left that night, he glanced back and saw her standing by the doorway, holding her child, the firelight glowing behind her. There was something about her, quiet strength, steady faith, that he couldn't forget. By the end of the season, the doctor wasn't the only one who had changed his view. The town that once looked at Clara with suspicion now greeted her with warmth. Mrs. Brandt saved her extra bread. The children waved when she passed, and even Harold Finch, avoiding her eyes, nodded stiffly in silent acknowledgement one morning at the market. Clara didn't respond with bitterness. She simply smiled because she no longer needed his approval. She had found her place, not through marriage, but through kindness, honesty, and courage. And though she didn't know it yet, the man who had once treated her as a stranger, the quiet doctor who had seen her worth when others could not, was beginning to imagine a future where her laughter filled more than just the walls of the church. The snow had begun to melt, leaving the streets wet and muddy. The air smelled of earth and pine, and the sound of dripping water filled the small town. Spring was coming to Millstone, and with it came a sense of new beginnings. Clara walked to the clinic early that morning, her twins bundled tightly in a small cart she pulled along. She liked the quiet mornings before the patients arrived. The streets were still, and the rising sun painted the town in shades of gold. She often whispered to her babies during those walks, telling them little stories or singing softly, her voice calm and tender. When she reached the clinic, Dr. Turner was already there, standing by the window with a cup of coffee. He smiled when he saw her. "You're up early as always, Mrs. Whitmore." Clara smiled back, setting the cart near the stove to keep the twins warm. "Old habits," she said. "Work keeps the heart steady." He nodded thoughtfully. "And your boys keep it full, I suppose." She looked at them lovingly. "Yes, they do. They're all I have." Over the months, Clara had become an important part of the clinic. She cleaned the rooms, boiled water for sterilizing instruments, and sometimes helped calm patients who were frightened. She never complained, even when the days were long. The doctor admired how she managed to balance everything: her work, her children, and her quiet dignity. One day, a young boy came running into the clinic crying. His hand was bleeding badly after cutting it on a broken glass bottle. His mother followed, pale and panicked. Clara quickly brought clean cloths while Dr. Turner prepared his tools. The boy was shaking, tears streaming down his cheeks. Clara knelt beside him, holding his good hand gently. "It's all right, sweetheart," she said softly. "You're so brave. The doctor will fix it in no time." Her voice was calm and soothing, like a lullaby. The boy's crying slowed as he listened to her. Dr. Turner stitched the cut carefully, watching her as he worked. There was something about the way she spoke, steady, kind, full of comfort, that seemed to ease not only the patients but also him. When the boy and his mother left, the doctor turned to her. "You have a gift, Clara," he said. "Not everyone can calm fear like that." She smiled, her cheeks pink. "I just remember what I used to tell my husband when he was hurt working in the mine, that pain passes but courage stays." The doctor looked at her quietly. He wanted to ask more about her husband, but he saw the sadness in her eyes and decided not to. Instead, he said softly, "I think your husband would be proud of you." Clara lowered her gaze, her hands tightening around the cloth she was folding. "I hope so," she whispered. As the weeks passed, Dr. Turner found more and more reasons to visit the church or check on Clara and her children. Sometimes he brought extra bread from the bakery or books for the twins, who were now beginning to crawl and giggle. He said it was just kindness, but the way he looked at Clara told another story, one of quiet admiration that he couldn't yet put into words. One evening, the town faced a heavy storm. Rain poured from the sky and the wind rattled every window. The church roof leaked badly, and Clara spent most of the night trying to catch the dripping water in buckets. Around midnight, there was a loud knock at the door. She opened it to see Dr. Turner, soaked to the skin, holding a lantern. "I came to check on you," he said quickly. "I was worried the little ones might catch a chill." She smiled in surprise. "You walked through the rain for that?" He shrugged lightly. "I've walked through worse for less." She laughed softly and stepped aside. "Come in, doctor. You'll catch cold yourself." He entered, shaking off the water. Inside, the twins were sleeping peacefully, wrapped tightly in their blankets. The small fire glowed, lighting Clara's face with a warm golden hue. For a moment, the doctor simply stood there, watching her move around the room, the way she adjusted the blankets, the soft care in her hands. "You make this old church feel alive," he said quietly. "Like a home?" Clara looked up, a bit startled. "It's not much of a home," she said gently. "Just borrowed walls and a little faith," he smiled. "Sometimes that's all anyone needs." They talked for a long time that night while the rain beat against the roof. She told him about her childhood by the sea, her father who loved to read poetry, and the way Samuel, her late husband, used to sing to her after long days of work. The doctor listened, not interrupting once. When she spoke about the day she lost Samuel, her voice trembled and he looked down, his hands tightening around his cup of tea. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "You've carried so much," she smiled sadly. "We all carry something, doctor. Some burdens are just quieter than others." After that night, something shifted between them. They didn't speak of feelings, but there was a new understanding, a gentle closeness. When he passed by the church, he would always stop to ask how she was. Sometimes he stayed for supper, sharing stories from the clinic while the twins played at his feet. The townsfolk began to notice. Mrs. Brandt whispered to her husband, "Have you seen how often the doctor visits the church lately?" He chuckled, saying, "About time that man found someone who makes him smile." Clara, however, never thought of it that way. To her, he was simply a friend, a man who had shown kindness when she had nothing. Yet deep down, when she saw him smile or heard his calm voice, her heart fluttered in ways she didn't understand. One afternoon, the doctor came back from a long trip to a nearby town. He brought a small wooden cradle with him, smooth, polished, and strong. "For the twins," he said, setting it down. Clara stared at it in shock. "Doctor, I can't accept this. It must have cost too much." He shook his head. "It didn't cost anything that matters. You've done more for this town than most people ever will. Let me do this." Her eyes filled with tears. "You're too kind," she whispered. He smiled softly. Kindness is never wasted. Later that night, as she watched her boys sleeping in their new cradle, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. For the first time since she'd arrived, she believed that maybe her life was turning toward light again. But not everyone was pleased. A few townsfolk, still clinging to old gossip, began to whisper that she was too close to the doctor. Some said she was trying to win his favor for comfort or position. When Clara heard the whispers, she stayed silent. She knew that arguing would only feed them. Instead, she kept working, her head held high. Dr. Turner heard the same gossip and confronted it quietly. "If kindness is something to whisper about," he told a few men at the store one morning, "then maybe we should all whisper a little more." His words spread quickly, and soon the gossip died down. People began to see Clara not as someone seeking pity, but as someone who had earned her place with courage and grace. As spring deepened, the town bloomed again. Green fields, fresh flowers, and warm sun. Clara's twins took their first steps in the clinic yard, stumbling and laughing while the doctor watched with pride. She clapped her hands, her face glowing with joy. "They're growing so fast," he said. She nodded, smiling. "They're my strength. They remind me every day why I keep going." He looked at her, his voice quiet but full of meaning. "And I think, Clara, that you remind this whole town why kindness still matters." She looked back at him, surprised, but before she could answer, one of the twins fell with a soft thud and burst into giggles. They both laughed, the sound blending with the warm afternoon air. It was in that small, ordinary moment, laughter, sunlight, and simple joy, that something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't a promise, not yet. Just a feeling, steady, gentle, and growing stronger each day. And though neither of them said it aloud, both knew their hearts had begun to find a new rhythm, one that beat not in sorrow or loneliness, but in quiet hope. Summer arrived in Millstone with bright skies and long golden days. The fields around the town turned the color of honey, and the air smelled of wheat and wildflowers. The townsfolk worked from sunrise to sunset, and laughter often echoed through the main street in the evenings. It was the kind of season that made people feel alive again. Clara had never known such peace before. Each morning she walked to the clinic with the twins, who now toddled along beside her, their tiny hands clutching her skirt. She had built a small, steady life, one made of honest work, gentle smiles, and quiet gratitude. Dr. Turner had become her closest friend, always ready with a kind word or helping hand. Their bond had deepened over time, though neither spoke of it openly. Still, in a small town, peace never lasted long without being tested. One dry afternoon, as Clara hung fresh linens behind the clinic, a strange smell filled the air, sharp and heavy like burning wood. She looked up and saw a faint line of smoke rising from the hills beyond the fields. Moments later, a young boy ran down the street shouting, "Fire! There's a fire near Finch's farm." Panic spread quickly. The men dropped their tools and women rushed to gather buckets of water. The fire had started in the dry grass beyond Harold Finch's wheat field, and the wind was carrying the flames fast toward the edge of town. Dr. Turner came out of the clinic, his face tense.
"Clara, stay here with the children," he said.
"I need to go help," but Clara shook her head firmly. "You'll need all the help you can get. I'll bring water from the well." He wanted to protest, but one look at her determined face told him there was no point. "All right," he said, "but stay close to the others." Within minutes, the whole town was gathered near the burning fields. The flames leapt high, painting the sky with orange light. Smoke stung everyone's eyes, and the sound of cracking wood echoed through the air. Men formed a line, passing buckets from the well to throw onto the flames while others beat at the fire with wet sacks. Clara joined the women at the edge, refilling buckets and shouting for water. Her heart pounded as the wind shifted, pushing the fire closer to the Finch farmhouse. She could hear someone screaming, a woman's voice, desperate and afraid. "That's Harold's sister." Someone shouted, "She's trapped inside." Without a thought, Clara dropped her bucket and ran toward the house. "Clara, wait," Dr. Turner called, but she was already gone. The heat hit her like a wall as she neared the farmhouse. Smoke billowed from the windows and the wooden porch was beginning to burn. She pulled her shawl over her mouth and ran through the open door, calling out, "Hello? Where are you?" "Here," came a weak voice from the back room. Clara followed the sound and found Harold's sister May trapped under a fallen beam. Her leg was pinned and she was coughing badly. Without thinking, Clara pushed against the beam, her arms shaking with effort. "You'll be all right, May," she said, trying to sound calm even as her lungs burned from the smoke. After several tries, she managed to move the beam enough for May to pull her leg free. "Come on," Clara urged, wrapping an arm around her. Together, they stumbled toward the door just as part of the roof began to collapse behind them. Outside, Dr. Turner ran to them, grabbing May and helping her away from the flames. Clara fell to her knees, coughing hard, her face streaked with soot. "Clara," the doctor said, kneeling beside her, "you could have been killed." She looked up at him through watery eyes and managed a weak smile. She was calling for help. I couldn't just stand there. He stared at her for a long moment, torn between anger and admiration. Then he said softly, "You're braver than most men I know." By nightfall, the fire was under control. Much of Finch's field had burned, but the farmhouse still stood. May's leg was injured but not broken, and Dr. Turner stayed by her side to make sure she was safe. Harold Finch himself stood nearby, covered in soot, staring at the damage in silence. When he finally looked up and saw Clara sitting near the water barrels, tired and coughing but alive, something in his eyes changed. He walked toward her slowly, his voice rough. "You saved my sister," he said. "After everything I did, you still helped?" Clara looked at him quietly. "It was the right thing to do," she said simply. He nodded, shame crossing his face. "I judged you wrong," he admitted. "You're a better person than I ever deserved." She smiled faintly but said nothing. Forgiveness was not something she needed to speak aloud. It was already in her heart. The next morning, the town gathered at the church to pray and give thanks that no lives were lost. People looked at Clara differently now, no longer with pity or gossip, but with respect. Children smiled at her, and women who once whispered behind her back now greeted her warmly. During the service, Dr. Turner couldn't help but glance at her. She was sitting near the front, holding her twins, her face lit by the morning light through the stained glass windows. He had seen many kinds of strength in his years as a doctor: the physical strength of men, the endurance of mothers, the quiet courage of the dying. But Clara's strength was something deeper. It came from kindness, from faith, and from love that asked for nothing in return. After the service, as the townsfolk left, the doctor walked beside her. "You know," he said softly, "I think this town owes you more than they realize." She shook her head with a gentle smile. "No one owes me anything, doctor. I just did what anyone would have done." He smiled, knowing she truly believed that. "Not everyone would have done what you did, Clara. For a moment they walked in silence, the summer breeze playing with the loose strands of her hair. Then she said quietly, "When I came here, I thought I'd lost everything. My husband, my home, my dignity. But maybe God brought me here to find something else." He stopped and looked at her, his eyes soft. "And what have you found?" She met his gaze, her voice calm and steady. "Peace. And people who see me for who I am." The doctor nodded slowly. "You deserve that, and more." As the weeks passed after the fire, Clara continued to help rebuild what had been lost. She sewed curtains for the damaged homes, helped cook meals for those who had been displaced, and watched as the town slowly returned to normal. People often said that Millstone felt warmer now, friendlier somehow, as if one woman's courage had reminded everyone what goodness truly looked like. Dr. Turner and Clara spent more time together. He invited her to help at the clinic's small garden, where herbs and flowers grew in neat rows. The twins loved to play in the dirt while their mother worked, their laughter filling the air. The doctor often caught himself watching them, the simple picture of a family he hadn't known he needed until now. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, the sky painted in orange and pink, the doctor stood beside Clara as she watered the plants. "You know," he said softly, "before you came, this town was just another place to me. Work, patience, routine. But now it feels like home." Clara looked at him, her heart beating a little faster. "I'm glad," she said gently. "Everyone deserves a home," he smiled. "And everyone deserves someone who makes it feel that way." She blushed, turning her face toward the setting sun so he wouldn't see the tears that had gathered in her eyes. For the first time since she had lost Samuel, she felt something more than gratitude or friendship. She felt hope, real and steady, like the roots of a strong tree growing quietly beneath her feet. The fire that had once threatened to destroy everything had, in a strange way, brought new life, not just to the town, but to her heart. Summer slowly turned into early autumn, and Millstone wore a softer, warmer look. The golden fields ripened with wheat, and the wind carried the scent of earth and hay. The town, once quiet and wary, had grown brighter somehow. Clara Whitmore and her twins had become part of its rhythm. Every morning she walked down the main street, pushing the little cart with her children, greeting neighbors who now smiled with genuine warmth. The twins had grown into lively toddlers, learning new words and taking confident steps. They laughed, freely, chasing each other in the churchyard or playing near the garden at Dr. Turner's clinic. Clara watched them often, marveling at their energy and curiosity. She sometimes paused and whispered, "You've made it this far, and we'll keep making it together." Dr. Turner had become a daily presence in her life, not just as the town's healer, but as someone who seemed to understand her in ways few others did. He often came by the church to check on her or to bring supplies for the twins, but their visits were no longer just about necessity. They lingered together, talking quietly as the children played, sharing moments of simple joy and laughter. One crisp morning, Clara was at the small garden behind the clinic, tending to the herbs while the twins toddled around picking flowers. The sun shone softly through the clouds, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. Dr. Turner approached, carrying a basket of fresh bread and apples from the market. "Good morning," he said, smiling as he set the basket down. Clara looked up, wiping her hands on her apron. "Good morning. You didn't have to bring all this." He shook his head. "It's no trouble. I wanted to see how my favorite little gardeners are doing." The twins squealed with delight, rushing over to the basket. Dr. Turner laughed as they eagerly grabbed an apple each, their tiny fingers sticky with juice. Clara smiled, watching them, and felt a warmth in her chest that she hadn't known she could feel again. After the children settled, he helped her water the plants. They worked in companionable silence, the kind that didn't need words. But as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the garden, Dr. Turner spoke softly. "Clara, I need to tell you something." She turned to him, her heart fluttering slightly. "What is it?" He looked at her with steady eyes, and for the first time she saw not just admiration, but something deeper, something like love. "Since the day you arrived in this town, I've watched you carry so much loss, fear, and yet always kindness. You've given more than most could ever hope to give. I want to be part of your life, Clara. Not just as a friend, but more. Clara felt her eyes fill with tears. She had never imagined this moment, not after the years of hardship and heartbreak she had endured, but as she looked at him, she saw truth in his words. He had always treated her with respect, admired her strength, and shared her burdens without asking for anything in return. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her voice trembling. You don't have to say anything right now, he replied gently. I just needed you to know. Whatever you choose, I'll respect it. But I hope we can build something together. You, the boys, and me. Clara's lips curved into a small, joyful smile. I think we can, she said softly, feeling the weight of her past lift just a little. From that day on, their bond grew stronger. The townspeople noticed the quiet companionship between them, but no one spoke of it in gossip. By now, Clara had earned their respect. She helped where she could, guided by her gentle spirit, and the town, in turn, treated her with warmth and appreciation. Even Harold Finch, the man who had rejected her, had grown to respect her courage, though he said nothing. Clara's life settled into a rhythm filled with work, laughter, and small joys. The twins learned to run and speak clearly, their laughter echoing through the church and garden. Clara taught them to help with chores, to be kind to others, and to take pride in their small victories. Every night she held them close, whispering stories of their father, of the sea she had grown up by, and of the new beginnings they had found. Dr. Turner became more than a friend. He became a steady presence in their home. He would read to the twins while Clara cooked, or take them for short walks when the sun was warm. He celebrated their milestones, laughed at their mischief, and offered support whenever she felt overwhelmed. Slowly, the bond between them deepened, built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. One autumn day, the town held a harvest festival. The streets were decorated with colorful ribbons, pumpkins, and freshly harvested wheat. Clara, the twins, and Dr. Turner attended together. The children ran freely, playing games and chasing each other, while Clara helped organize some of the festival activities, teaching the children how to make simple decorations. Dr. Turner watched her from across the street, a proud smile on his face. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in pink and orange hues, Dr. Turner approached her. Clara, he said softly, look around. This town, these people, you've changed it in ways no one could have imagined. And I see it too. How much love and strength you carry every day. Clara smiled, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. We've all changed, Doctor. The town, the people, even us. He took her hand gently, holding it with care. I want to be part of that change with you, he said. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness but of happiness. Then we will, she said, together. In the days that followed, Clara and Dr. Turner worked to make life better for their small community. They cared for the sick, taught children, and helped neighbors in need. Clara's reputation had grown from the rejected bride to a pillar of the town, a woman whose courage, kindness, and determination inspired everyone around her. People often said that Millstone felt brighter, warmer, and more alive because of her. As winter approached once again, Clara looked at the twins playing by the fire. Their laughter filled the small room with warmth. Dr. Turner stood nearby, watching them with a gentle smile. She realized that life, which had once seemed so harsh and unkind, had now given her something she thought she would never have again, a home filled with love, hope, and family. She knew that the journey had not been easy. There had been sorrow, rejection, and moments when she had felt hopeless. But through it all, she had persevered. She had found strength in her children, in her faith, and in the kindness of those who saw her worth. And in the quiet moments, she had discovered love again. Not the hurried, careless kind, but the steady, patient love of someone who truly valued her heart. One evening, as the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, Clara and Dr. Turner stood outside the small church, watching the world turn white. The twins played nearby, giggling as they caught snowflakes on their tongues. Clara took Dr. Turner's hand in hers, feeling the warmth of his fingers. "We've come a long way," she said softly, her eyes on the falling snow. "Yes," he agreed, looking at her with tenderness, "and I think this is only the beginning." Clara smiled, her heart full. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, the train ride, the rejection, the long nights of worry and hard work. She thought of the townsfolk, who had once whispered behind her back but now greeted her with respect. And she thought of the man who had seen her worth when others could not, and who had chosen to stand by her side. For the first time in many years, Clara felt completely at peace. Her past, while not forgotten, no longer held power over her. The loss she had suffered, the hardships she had faced, and the nights of uncertainty had shaped her into someone strong, resilient, and full of love. And now, surrounded by her children, the town that had become her home, and the man who loved her, she could finally see the future clearly, bright, full of hope, and filled with possibility. As the snow settled on the town, on the fields, and on the rooftops, Clara held her twins close and whispered, "We are home." And in that moment, she knew that no matter what the future held, they had everything they needed: courage, love, and each other. Millstone had given her more than shelter. It had given her a life renewed. And in the warm, flickering light of the small church, with the laughter of children and the quiet presence of someone who truly cared, Clara finally felt whole,